consumer perception of origin online store affected by the image of the country. An experiment study among Japanese consumers that we invent the speaker that when was also Vanessa recommended that give a proposal wrong to invent his presentation. Okay.
Good morning, everyone. I think this presentation might be a little bit different from presentations throughout this conference. So if you have any questions about any of the terms or anything in particular, please let me know. This presentation is about consumer behavior, specifically consumer perception of foreign online stores, whether they are or not affected by the country of origin of that online store. It was an experiment conducted among Japanese consumers. So as a brief introduction, we know that consumers have negative expectations, either be Japanese consumers or consumers all over the world, about the troubles that may occur when they buy online in foreign online shops. In contrast to trying to buy online in your own country, you know your rules, you know the payment system, you trust or not trust the website. But when you go to online stores which are from another country, then you lack that information. So whether you have real experience or not, if you don't know the website, then your perception of risk is increased. Then many factors have been looked at in this case, but one that has not received much attention is perception of the image of the country itself. What do I mean by the perception of the country? We'll see it a little bit more in the theoretical part. But for example, say you go to a website from the United States. You don't know anything about that website. It's not Amazon.com. It's any other website. Just by knowing the country, that it's from the United States, you have certain perceptions based on that country. So that is most of it the idea. So the purpose here is to investigate whether this country of image does have an effect on the perception of the foreign online store, specifically on 3 dimensions. First, the visual appeal, whether you like or not the website, trust on that website, and whether or not you would like to buy from it. As I mentioned, country of origin is an extrinsic cue for the evaluation of foreign products. That's how it's been investigated previously. Initially, as the effects of the made-in label. For example, this type of studies started from 1950s, 1960s, almost that, asking consumers what they thought about the same product. If originally it was, I think, from Central America. If the product came from Costa Rica, or the product came from another country. Same here, or nowadays, if we think of a product, you say this product, we don't know anything else about the product, but we know it's made in Taiwan, or we know it's made in Bangladesh, or we know it's made in Japan. Without knowing anything about the product, we have certain stereotypes about it. The country of origin image then is thought to have 2 main dimensions. One is cognitive, which is the perception about the country's infrastructure, the economic development, etc., their technology. And the other one is affective, whether people perceive that country to be nice, fun, or whether there's all sorts of emotional responses to that country. The online store perceptions that we're going to looked at, are 2 beliefs about the online store. One is about the aesthetic value, the design of the website, and the other one about its trustworthiness. The first one, visual appeal. Like I said, it's the aesthetic perception. We use this dimension because it's one that the consumers can immediately access. So it makes it very influential to other perceptions of the country. If you go to a website, the first thing that you see is its design, it's the face of the website. So it's sort of like a very strong first impression. And also, if the website is appealing, there's a very close perception of quality. It's one of its dimensions. The other one is trust. Trust as, is defined as the belief that the vendor will act in a favorable way towards the consumer. Trust has been indicated as very important in online shopping, just from the very start. But it's even more important, like I mentioned, in a cross-border context, because there's that increased perception of risk. Our proposed model is this influence of the two cognitive and affective dimensions of the country of origin towards trust, visual appeal, and also, like I mentioned, on the behavior of the consumer. We know from previous research that both beliefs about the product and also the behavior are affected towards by this country of origin image. So first we hypothesize that these two dimensions will have an influence on visual appeal. Each arrow means a positive influence here from the country of origin image towards the dimension of the website. It has been found before that, like I mentioned, the image can affect evaluation of the design. Because the design has two main components, it indicates ability and quality, the ability of a website to realize a good design. And also it's related to affective responses, because you see a design and you think it's good, it gives you a fun feeling, it gives you a warm feeling, etc. So it's both of the dimensions are probably influential. The second one on trust is in situations of initial trust, that is when the consumer first goes to a website, it's very important the contextual information. Usually the consumer does not know anything about the website. So the general situation of online shopping, or whether, for example, it has third-party trust signs, or whether it's sponsored by anyone, or indicators such as it, is very important. In the case of cross-border electronic commerce in an online situation, then the image of the country becomes this contextual information. You may not know anything about the website, but you know about the country, or at least have heard about it. Final one, as I mentioned, is the effect of that image on the behavior. Previous research on products has seen that this influence is increasing when you have very little information about the product itself. So it's probably going to be influential here in an international setting. The other hypotheses are just added for completion. They're just based on previous research. So we conducted an experiment. It was based on a survey conducted among Japanese participants. It was a between subjects design experiment. This means that each participant only saw one version of the experiment, and the items used in the survey were adapted from previous studies. We used two countries, Thailand and Singapore. We use these countries because they're close to Japan, so that means that Japanese probably know about them. They're pretty popular as a travel destination, and they have a positive relationship with Japan in general. We used two mock-up B2C online stores that were developed specifically for the experiment, and they will have the same design. Like I mentioned, participants were randomly assigned to view just one of the versions. Only one participant only saw either a Thai or a Singaporean website. And then they were asked questions about them. These were the websites that were designed for the experiment. As you can see, the basic design is the same. Only the one on the left is for Thailand, so it includes symbols to indicate that it is from that country. And on the right side, the website from Singapore. They were all written in Japanese language because it's complicated to do the experiment in English language because of the language barrier itself. But otherwise, the websites were identical. I won't go too much into the details of the analysis, but the sample that we obtained was 1,919 participants, more or less equally divided in the two groups. The data obtained was validated. Both groups had the same mean and distribution of age and sex between the experiments, so both groups, at least in those characteristics, were the same. Both groups also, on those demographic characteristics, were a normal distribution. All the variables also had a normal distribution, and we removed some outliers from the data. The analysis used was based on factor analysis. We conducted both confirmatory factor analysis to validate that the measurement model, that the items that we were using were valid, and also structural equation modeling to do the hypothesis validation. I can go into the details if somebody has any questions. So the results showed, first for the Thai online store, the hypothesis of influence on visual appeal was confirmed. Both dimensions were influential on the visual appeal, more or less at the same strength. Trust, as is probably very obvious, the cognitive, that is the economic and the technological dimension of the country, is more influential in this case for Thailand than the affective image. Finally, we saw that only the country cognitive image was influential on the intention of whether or not to buy on that store. The affection towards the country had no positive influence. And all the other hypotheses were validated. So we can see that almost all hypotheses were validated in the case of Thailand, with the exception of the influence of the country affective image on intention of use. In Singapore, on the other hand, the first visual appeal, the country cognitive image did not have a significant effect, only the affective image. Then, similarly, on trust, only the country cognitive image had an influence and not the affective one. So this is it's vice versa, the effect. However, there was no influence between the country of origin image on intention of use in the particular case of Singapore. So neither of those dimensions had any effect. And all the other hypotheses were confirmed. And we see that in the case of Singapore, the effect is less. There are less significant relationships. So as a general discussion from the results of this analysis, we can see that there are differences based on country of origin. Even though the websites were the same design, the consumers had no idea about the website itself, it was new to them. We can see that in the case of the Singaporean online store, the country of origin image had a limited effect compared to the case of Thailand. So this contradicts previous research on this effect on products, because it said that developed countries should have a stronger influence on the product than developing countries, just by virtue of their stronger positive image. So one explanation in this case may be that for Singapore, the country of origin image, specifically or especially the economic and technological part, it's acting like a threshold variable. What I mean is that once you know that a country has a certain level of development in their economic dimension or their infrastructure and technology, then that no longer is considered by the consumer. Whether in a developing country, for example, where consumers might have more trouble believing in that information. If you have the positive information, then it is positively influential. Like I said, in the case of Thailand, the situation of a less developed country then may bring more concerns about that website. So we have this idea that less developed countries may be more risk in the case of the online store. Then it is present in the consumer's mind. Therefore, if you have a positive image, neutral to positive, then it would be influential. There's one main limitation of this research is that these results are based on correlation analysis. What I mean is that we did not manipulate the perception of the country itself. So even though the analysis confirmed the hypothesis, it's still needed to validate on an experimental basis. So the conclusion is, well, we validated that there is some effect of the country of origin image on foreign online stores. But this is dependent on the country of origin itself, so it won't work the same way for all countries. The implication of this is that the image of the country should be considered in strategies for development of international online shopping. So for example, if a developing country wants to improve on their image of their online shopping internationally, they should probably have some emphasis on their economic development and on their infrastructure. On the other hand, in a case of a developed country, maybe emotional or affective quality should be more emphasized, especially for countries which do not have like a strong emotional image on consumers. Further research should validate this effect for different countries and consumer populations, because these results only really work for the pair of Thailand website, Japanese consumers, Singaporean website, Japanese consumers. These relationships may be different with, I don't know, Taiwan consumers, for example, because each consumer population would have their own image about other countries. So it has to be validated on other populations. And also, like I mentioned, you should probably consider conducting experimental manipulations on that country of origin image to see if by this experimental manipulation, either on the positive or on the negative side, have any effect on this, and whether then any kind of institution or international institutions could use this kind of research to improve on the state of international knowledge. Thank you.
Hey, have any question?
Yeah, thanks for your awesome presentation. It's a really interesting subject, and well, I was just wondering. I guess it's part of a bigger work, and well, websites are more about trust, are more about should I buy here or not. Like I'm putting my credit card number here, so it's quite tricky sometimes, and we have lots of scammers on the internet and stuff like that. But I was just thinking about the part of the product. Did you take into account the part of the product, or do you have this idea of just like, oh, I'm buying my product from United States, I guess the part is maybe really good because of these and these.
Right. We did include in the survey some items regarding the products, whether they thought they were nice products, whether they thought the value was good, etc., to compare that between the Thai and the Singaporean website. So both of them had the same valuation. Because this is a mock-up store, there's not really much chance for the consumers to really go into it and they may not really be interested in the product. But there was no difference between the two countries. That is different in the case of a real website, which is something that should probably also be conducted. Because in that case, the factor of product would definitely be important. Then it becomes another problem, because maybe the product is not from that same country, so that's quality of the product. And so more and more variables need to be added. Like you said, and I can mention, the country of origin image is not a new subject, but it is new, at least I haven't seen it for websites. So all of that we need to be checked in the future.
Okay, have other question? Any question? Then I have one question. In your experiment, we see that have many stores testing. So you have the number of the store. How many store for the experiments?
Sorry, yes, you mean?
Only one store or?
Yes, it was only one online store per country.
Yeah,
So yes, so it was not only this screenshot that I'm showing, but different pages for the website. But it was only one.
And how do you select the hypothesis? Have other previous research that consider this factor?
Yes, like I said, static valuation, or in this case visual appeal, has been validated for products, even for services, and also for trust in the case of products. So I'm basing it mostly on previous research done on products. Unfortunately, there's no research done on websites, so there is an inference that has to be made whether this website is a product, whether this website acts as a service. Different, I guess, from products, trust is a more important consideration for websites. So few previous research have considered trust in the context of products. Sometimes in the context of services, it's been a little bit more considered. But the basis of these relationships is done on the research of products and services.
Okay, this is an interesting research for the consumer, for regional consumer to buy product from outside of their country. So have other question. And that's thanks for the presentation. Thank you.